Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello, bonjour.
Barry Saleho.
On behalf of ICLE Africa,
the African Center for Cities,
Our Future Cities,
Red Cross Crescent Climate Center,
and partners,
we're excited to welcome all of you
to the Rise Africa 2022 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing since 2020
as a platform for thinkers,
doers,
and enablers,
committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
This year's theme is
creativity.
For me, this means blending skills to be able to communicate the climate change complexity in rapidly urbanizing cities.
We are walking dynamites of creative expression, whether it be in the arts, in the sciences, or in tech.
There are so many people in the African continent who have a huge skill base and are creative in the way they approach challenges.
Creativity in Africa is about embracing our own. It's about dynamism, and it's about embracing our indigenous knowledge.
I think agency is finding ways of giving power back to people, to groups, to young people, especially on a continent where it's a very young population.
One should be taking ownership and the responsibility to create an Africa that they would like to live in, as well as leave behind for the future generations.
I think what agency means to me is change from the ground up.
The importance of urgency is the recognition of the past and the recognition that we've lost time.
Urgency is about acting now to build more inclusive, productive, and resilient cities.
There's this need to creatively redesign and unlearn and explore new ways of thinking.
The festival is hosting 33 sessions
with 135 provocateurs
from across Africa and the world.
Every session aims to show new ideas,
showcase ongoing action,
and launch new initiatives, bringing participants together
to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you.
At the festival, we encourage you to showcase your business and projects,
build lasting partnerships,
unleash your creative potential,
commit to sustainable action.
Rise Africa is about translating ideas into action. What actions are you going to commit to this festival?
Before the session begins, it is important to note that you're being recorded.
And by participating, you are given the consent to be recorded.
All recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
Creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities.
And so we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming.
L'Afrique est fatiguée de se retrouver dans l'obscurité. Elle est fatiguée de naviguer contre les courants de l'industrialisation. L'Afrique me dit qu'elle est fatiguée de se reposer au feu du bois. Il est donc temps de faire sauter les compteurs. Éclairons l'Afrique, libérons son énergie pour libérer son potentiel. Accélérons le rythme cardiaque de son développement. Libérons son énergie pour libérer son potentiel. Transformons l'enveloppe énergétique de l'Afrique pour stimuler son développement. Car la nature nous a tellement gratifiés de ses richesses. Changeons l'histoire, éclairons l'Afrique, donnons un bout de lumière à chaque foyer en Afrique est une possibilité. Changeons l'histoire, éclairons l'Afrique. Libérons son énergie pour libérer son potentiel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Curry. I'm the Associate Director of the Urban Systems Unit at ICLE Africa and the Chair of the Rise Africa platform. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the opening session of the Rise Africa 2022 Action Festival and to the first of a three-part series on this year's theme, creativity, agency, urgency. On behalf of ICLE Africa, Our Future Cities, the African Center for Cities, and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Center, our convening partners, as well as all partners and people who have put forward generously to make this festival happen, we would like to welcome you into this festival with warm enthusiasm. Rise Africa has been developing over a number of years, and you've heard in the video, as a platform of thinkers, doers, and enablers that are bringing people and attempting to bring people together to think deeply about how we actually do and arrive at sustainable cities. What's interesting is we're in the second edition. We launched virtually through monthly events in 2020. We had our Action Festival last year in May around Africa Day. And here we are again in 2022 around Africa Day on the 25th of May. And I think Rise Africa is still finding its worldview. It's seeking to be a positive platform to reinforce good efforts. It's seeking to be action-oriented, not satisfied with only talk. It seeks to be future-looking. But it's actively grappling with uncertain futures and difficult realities. Kobe Brandt, our regional director, insists that we must engage with our pasts, yes, to understand the horrors done upon the continent, but also to celebrate the civilizations that rose and presented different forms of society and possibility. To look back to understand intrinsic characteristics of African cities, which are still visible now. She says, it is in the current challenges and uncertainties that we can access new opportunities to make a living and live life in close proximity to our fellow Africans in vibrant, buzzing urban environments. Edgar Peterson, the director of the African Center for Cities, notes that we cannot append the legacies of colonialism, authoritarianism, economic dependency, and environmental degradation without a sharp break with what we have inherited. He expresses that sustainable cities as discourse is always a provocation and an aesthetic register, a daily reminder that we need to simultaneously fight the structural forces that shape our default systems, instantiate alternatives, and design new forms of collective action, love, and imagination. We've just returned from the AfriCity Summit held in Kisumu and are foolishly putting on a new endeavor this week with Rise Africa. And our host there, the Deputy Governor of Kisumu, provided two insights in his speeches. When John Hanning Speke arrived at the shores of a lake, he named it for his queen, and it still bears the name Lake Victoria. In Africa, with no notion, like our powerful waterfall Mosi Otunya, misnamed by its so-called discoverers, that this lake was actually called Namlolwe, Nalubale, Nyanza, Tukerewe, by those who actually shared a relationship with its waters. He further reflected on two discourses which were popularized by many around the world, that of the Dark Continent and Afro-pessimism, and within a decade later, that of Africa Rising. And while we bear the name Rise Africa and wish to express a positive and an optimistic worldview, we also aim to navigate in between those two. It is neither useful to be overly pessimistic nor overly optimistic so that we blind ourselves to the realities that we're engaging with. So back to Rise Africa and its worldview, I think it's still emerging, but it's borrowing from these sentiments expressed before and trying to articulate and embody and demonstrate a new way of being in growing uncertainty. And this is what our theme for this year is trying to explore the tension between creativity, the processes in which art, creative expression, cultural expression, and the things that make us human and make living and sharing worthwhile are formed. Agency, in which we are exploring processes in which we improve the voice of all people in our society, making space for those who are vulnerable, making space for people with different experiences to our own so that we can learn from them, making space to ensure that everyone has a say in the cities that they are living and the societies in which they're living. And both of these processes of creativity and agency require time. And what does that mean when we are 8 years left in our route to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? When all around us, we see our cities' infrastructure degrading, our environments degrading, and seeing real demonstrations of climate crisis all around us, flooding and drought hand in hand. And these calls to act now, act with urgency. We cannot wait. So exploring that tension between processes that allow us to be very purposeful in our action and inclusive in our action, while needing to lay the foundation for the next 100 years of infrastructure, the next 100 years of societal engagement. Rise Africa, finally, is a very generous platform. And from ICLEI Africa's side, I wish to appreciate everyone who's contributed to it. I find myself feeling incredibly moved as I come back from Kisumu to Cape Town, from where we're hosting a number of sessions, by how much people have given of themselves and their ideas into this platform. So I wish to offer my appreciation for you for joining us in this opening, and hope that you will explore the generous offerings by other session hosts from across the continent and the world. We have about 1,700 registrants from about 1,100 unique people. And I hope that the conversations, the ideas shared, the projects demonstrated will be inspiring to you. And as the video says, I hope that you will let us know how this platform has inspired you and give us guidance for how you would like to see it grow. So after a long opening, I'd like to turn to today's session, which is going to be hosted by Eddie Jemba and focusing specifically on creativity. And I hope that you'll join us tomorrow, where we'll explore agency, and on Wednesday, where we'll explore urgency and tie the themes together. So Eddie taught me a very nice virtual engagement tool, which is called the Zoom shower. And in the spirit of creativity, last year, we developed a Rise Africa playlist from our own personal excitement with African music. And I'd like to invite everyone to write into the chat, don't send it yet, one song, a name of a song and an artist that comes to mind when you think of creativity, agency, urgency. So I'm going to come into the chat here and type my thoughts for who comes to mind when I think of this song. Let's take 25 seconds just to put in a song that comes to mind when thinking of creativity, agency, urgency. And when I send, we'll send them all. You will have a flurry of ideas of different songs. Has everyone got this? Just finish writing my artist.
Well, Paul,
okay,
I think
and send.
Ahead of your time.
Fabulous. So if you missed the shower, we invite you to put it into chat throughout the session, and we'll share back with you the playlist that everyone has contributed to by the end of the festival. So I'm going to hand over to Eddie, who's going to guide us through our conversation and introduce creativity.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks everyone who has come in, 99 participants so far and more. My name is Eddie Jemba from the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. I bring you greetings from Kampala. Well, you could also say Entebbe. Pearl of Africa, Uganda. Everything has to be related to Africa. Well, what do we have today? Today, as you know, it's about creativity. Creativity. We are going to be, we have, now I'm borrowing Paul's word, curated this session for you, with you in mind. And therefore, we are going to be having a couple of speakers to just give you a flavor. Who do we have coming soon? So we'll have speakers giving us some inspiration about what they do and how do they interpret creativity. But we'll also give you an opportunity to interpret creativity in your own area of work and you will be sharing that with us here in the chat shower. Now, talk about creativity. I brought someone to accompany me, and that is our original African guitar. In my mother tongue, it's called Ndingidi. It brings lots of memories, and recently I haven't seen someone playing one in a long while. But if you know how to play it, please sign up for lessons to teach me creativity. I think our forefathers were quite creative, and we are creative, and we will build on their creativity. Anyway, back to the session. So today, who do we have lined up for you to speak or to challenge, inspire you? We do have, look, a poet in the house, Malika, and Malika is contributing to South African arts, culture, and poetry for over 25 years. Who do we have? Tosi, and you'll be hearing more from them, so you'll have their brief description down there. Who do we have? Tosi, a principal architect. My son always challenges me with that word, architect and architecture. But anyway, Tosi, a founder and principal of architectural studio, CM Design, Atelier, and Luxury Furniture. You'll be hearing more about Tosi. Who do we have today lined up for you? Rashik. Rashik Fatah is an urbanist and CEO of Our Future Cities. Hey, who do we have today? Nwabisa, Strategic Partnership Director, Branson Center of Entrepreneurship, South Africa. Who do we have today for you? Olamide, Director, Lagos Urban Development Initiative, Nigeria. Who do we have today? You have me. Hey. Yes, you have me. But anyway, so look forward to some inspirational, some challenging on creativity in the African cities. Now, apart from that, I would like to say that this is a continuation in some ways of a communication that we started last year at Rise Africa, where we talked about something that was quite inspirational. Maybe some of you were here, but last year we had shaping and owning African urban narratives through literature, art, and movement building. And at that time, we had Pato, founder from Sustain 267. We also had Lesego, an architect and aspiring urban designer and co-founder of Uhuru Heritage. We had Arthur Adair, a co-founder and director at Kunke Design Initiative. We had Jean Fall. From Cineworks, Gugu from Center for Study of Violence and Reconciliation, Shafiq Aitimani, a construction manager and architect from Food Construction Corporation. Now, then we were talking about shaping and owning African urban narratives through literature, art, and movement building. Today, we are talking about creativity. Creativity. Now, when we talk about creativity and how we embed imagination into everyday life, I think something comes into your mind, doesn't it? Oh, did I forget to mention that we also have Malika? Malika is also going to be sharing some inspiration about creativity and how it about the role of creativity in the society and how to curate creative expressions. Yes, I think I mentioned about Marika, but it's always a pleasure to say that again. Anyhow, back to you, our participants. It's your opportunity to contribute to this session as we begin. Is there a word that describes creativity in your language? Please type it in the chat. what does creativity mean to you? Yes, now it's your turn. It's not my turn to talk. It's your turn, our participants. What word describes creativity in your language? I know that your brains are going like this. Creativity. Well, there you go. Awesome. See that? Openness, body, ragazzi, bonono, ubunifu, lovus. My friend. Okay. How? Interconnection. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, this is now connecting us to your motherland, connecting us to your space, connecting us to your culture, connecting us to where you are. Thank you very much for sharing that. And you can keep it coming, please. Swahili ubunifu. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing that. Now, this is the awaited moment where we are going to be hearing from our panelists. And we will start with Malika. Malika, what is the role of creativity in society? How do we cultivate more creative expressions? That's where we begin from. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Before I go into talking from the head, I'm going to talk from the heart and the whole body. Above the nagging traffic drone, clogging this weathered city zone, even as I weave my way through another buzzing taxi rank talent trap, amidst smoke and hissing primer stoves, smoke and hissing primer stoves, people in droves who seldom look up. This morning is new, no matter where or when we wake up. This morning is new, no matter what we do. This morning is new, no matter where or when we wake up. No matter what we do, this morning is new. Yes, it is. This moment is new. Even here, in this not so grand parade, where gutter fumes compete with the reek of cheap liquor, the sight of children strewn like litter, our children like litter. And even beyond the browning bandages around forgotten limbs, unforgettable stab wounds, beyond the erosion, the toxic corruption, the shooting, the looting, the endless erosion, still, this morning is new, no matter where or when we wake up. This morning is new, no matter what we do. This moment is new, no matter where or when we wake up. No matter what we do, this moment is new. It's new. It's new. Woo. It's new. Look up. Greetings to all of you. It is such a joy to be in this circle today, in this moment, and to begin on a morning that has as many challenges as our mornings do. At a time in the world where we've mentioned them already, climate change, but also a COVID world is an is a world that has really amplified the sense of how we navigate so many conflicting and parallel challenges, but also how our extraordinary vulnerability forces us to reconnect and to go inward in figuring out how we navigate. It keeps us awake. This idea of this moment is new, this morning is new. That sense of urgency, agency that you've been hearing about is absolutely connected to this concept of creativity. For me, creativity is an inherent human quality. It's indigenous to being human. And I think one of the first things that we have challenges around in terms of creativity as an embedded element, practice, contributor to the making of cities, of place, of community, a sense of belonging, of safety, all those elements of what it is to navigate our urban spaces and to have urban communities, is that our disconnect is the assumption that creativity or the arts or artistic expression is something outside of us, something that only some people have, something that is only used in limited context sometimes as a kind of icing or an element that gets injected into a project or an event because we need some entertainment. And these kind of disconnects are really underestimating what the power of creativity is as an indigenous human resource. When I say this, for me, creativity is as natural as breathing. I think of the body as a constantly evolving work of art. Our cities are not static places. They are moving bodies. They are influenced by the elements. They are reshaped by our inputs, our transporting ourselves, our intersecting within those spaces is the lifeblood of what makes that place alive. And our forms of expression are not only artistic, it's the way that we use limited resources to innovate in those spaces to ensure that our humanity is acknowledged, expressed, has breathing space. And you see this in so many ways in African cities, but you also have, if I think about my own history in Cape Town, of about 25 years of working in the city with numerous partners, whether that be local or national government, museums, artist communities, festivals, once-off events, various campaigns with NGOs. All of these years and versions of projects that I have collaborated on, there are so many lessons that we could learn from this. And I've been talking about connection and disconnection, where creativity is inherently a practice of connectivity, of recognizing ways of joining the dots, of tapping into resources that others may not see or value in the same way. But some of the lessons that I received from this process of journeying, whether I was curating multimedia installations or poetry walking tours through the city, or getting poets and artists or singers onto a bus, or having dancers move through the urban space and engage with the public, all of this was about tapping into a resource that was within and bringing it out. And I really want to keep it that simple. I want to say this because there is such a pervasive mentality that we are in Africa in some ways in a state of lack. And when you think about creativity as a resource, that as long as we live and breathe, it is here. We have built these cities. We have restored places that have been destroyed. We have resurrected ourselves from so much devastation. And the role of artists and creators in those processes is way beyond a colorful or emotional experience of that place. The ways in which we bring creativity into these spaces are as documenters, as activists, as visionaries, as healers, as storytellers, as community builders, as educators. And the ways in which we language through the multiple arts media is a way of helping even broader communities understand that there is a place for everyone in this story. So the contribution of what will change and shift and heal and grow our city and communal spaces has to come from all of us being included and a inclusive participation. And if artists, for example, are seen in a siloed way as a different kind of human being that has to be imported into a process, as opposed to citizens, active members of community with a resource of translation, able to say, you may not realize the resource that you have when you're putting up your fruit stall, or when you know, working on your taxi in that particular place, or dealing with customers that come into your arena. But what are the ways in which, when we dream the changes that we want to see, what are the ways in which we can hold a conversation with each other in which your own creativity can be tapped into? This is an underestimated resource. Eddie, you wanted to say something?
Malika, I wanted to pause on those questions. Then we transition to the next, because that's a good challenge to our participants in general, but also our panelists who will also be reflecting on similar during our discussion moment. Thank you very much, Malika. It was such a I think, I don't know how to describe that moment when you were singing, transposing us into the moment of where we step out of our usual ways of starting, these kind of conferences and workshops to a different way, which I think also sparks creativity in our own mind. Well, we'll hear more from you, Malika, just in a moment. Right now, allow me to transition to Rashik. Rashik, probably Malika has already tickled a little bit of what you are about to say, or in some ways they might be related or different. But how does creativity manifest in our cities?
Well, I think firstly, I don't think we are doing nearly enough to foster creativity in cities. Malika mentioned limited resources, and so why? What are the causes that we are providing limited resources or not enabling creativity to flourish? If we think about parts of the global north, the scale of funding organizations that fund creativity, that foster creativity, I think we need a complete mind shift in the way we're tackling some of our biggest problems around inequality and climate change, that it all has to be under such stress and with so few resources that creativity can only flourish in those environments. I think we need to step out of that. And I think this is a question for agencies, institutions, governments, some of the larger banks, into saying, why aren't we really investing in creativity? If we're thinking of the next, let's say, climate change startup, if we're thinking about the next, progressive architecture firm to tackle affordable housing, or possibly an arts and design group that's really going to advocate and build movements for climate change, it's in that space where we need, an abundance of resources and not expect these various partners and individuals and organizations to flourish, despite that. So I think firstly for me is, where are the resources and how do we reframe the next few decades into an abundance of resources for arts, culture, design, indigenous respect for indigenous spaces and environments, and start to build from there, and not just speak of investment purely in terms of very hard infrastructure, because we're all human at the end of the day. We all aspire to a better future world, to better cities and communities, to better urban spaces, and there must be a way that we can do that. And the reason I bring this up is, frequently we are drawing on resources from elsewhere to sort of direct into this space. And I think of countries like the Netherlands and Germany and Switzerland and various others where the arts and creativity and creative organizations really are supported in an abundant way. And while we perhaps sort of are pulling from here and there in our particular global South context. So I think firstly is how do we transition from a scarce, limited resource in that space? But I think creativity manifests in people. I think it's every time somebody steps outside of their boundary. I think Rise Africa is part of this. So that government official who steps out of their boundary to bring in somebody who works in a different way, facilitates in a different way. It's that engineer or architect who pushes the boundaries on their field, which says stick to specific regulations, stick to this box, stick to the national road regulations. And I think it's in those sort of daring and ambitious organizations and people that dare to bring in arts and music and culture into their everyday. And I think this is where we're seeing creativity flourish. It's those daring and bold individuals and groups that continue to push the boundaries in their work and don't wait purely for a singular large event or moment to do that.
Thank you very much, Rashik. Pushing the boundaries, respect for indigenous spaces and environment. I take this, I keep it on the sides here, and embracing the arts. Now, I'm mostly describe myself as a climate scientist who turned the social scientist, or with social science inclination. So pushing the boundaries, that's a challenge that you leave with me. Thank you very much, Rashik. Now moving over to Tosi. When we talk about designing buildings and our cities, how can we embed creativity to make sure that we come up with aspirational spaces?
I think great. I think the first thing to note is that Africa has always been a very creative space. Every solution down to, the spoons, the furniture in our homes have been designed. This really has been, creativity has been hiding in plain sight. But I do think that, as the continent has developed and evolved, we have lost the consciousness towards that creativity that is so inert in our realities. And we do need to now bring that back to the forefront. So it's something that can be celebrated. I think first and foremost, I think creativity also has to do with identity. It has to do with the feasibility of construction. It has to do with the materials that we use. I firmly believe that seeing is believing. And where we've gone through a phase of evolution or development that has brought to a forefront and a use of external materials as seen as the only proper way that buildings can exist. The minute that we start to bring back, local, and I use the word very sparingly, vernacular, which really is about building with materials that are available in that locality. I think once we start to do that, people start to see that what is possible, that has always been with us, and ensure that by using those materials and looking for motives of cultural identity to place in our buildings, that we are able to then create more inspiration that then becomes a ripple effect. It's done on one project, people see it, a technology is developed, other people see how possible, how cost effective, how sustainable it is. And then you start to get this you start to get this appear as a movement where everyone starts to realize that they can do this with the buildings, and it starts to be used a lot more as a standard mode of construction or a building detail that people see is very realistic in this environment. I think just carrying on from, and I think it's just great to say this, on the video that we had at the beginning of the conference, there was something there about embracing indigenous knowledge. This has been with us. We just need to be very aware of it and use it in our everyday lives. And then also, as Malika said, the availability of resource. There's something this continent has done so well. We have used our resources where we have limitations in such a celebratory way, even down to, the reality of what is considered in a very Western sense as waste. It's so amazing when you see what people are able to create objects, building materials, from plastic, from even car parts that have been imported into our countries for secondhand use. You know, we have this innate ability to create. And I think that we need to acknowledge that it's always been here and really now take it and celebrate it further.
Thank you very much, Tosi. So we need to acknowledge it, embrace it, meaning creativity, and then put it to use and scale it out. Thank you very much. Well, now, in case you were wondering who is Tosi, who was talking to us, I would like to give you a snapshot of who Tosi is in the chat. But as you listen to all our speakers, please be sure to, share any question that arises in your mind, any challenge, but then also how do you relate to what they say? And how does that relate back to creativity in your own area of work? Well, I still have some more for you. I hope you are getting inspired on the creative side. Well, now I'd like to invite Nabisa. Nabisa, how do we enable imagination and innovation in new entrepreneurs? How do we create change from within established businesses or organizations? And there you go.
Thanks so much, Kitty, and good morning to everyone. So I'm from the Branson Center for Entrepreneurship, and it's important that I actually give you a sense of who we are. We're part of the Virgin Group, and we really hold, our namesake's ethos and how business actually is a force for good. So when we're thinking about how to inspire and ignite creativity within the business sector, be it within emerging businesses or with established businesses, it's actually going back to the real purpose of what Virgin stands for and what we actually are here to do in the world as a Branson Center, which is to change business for good. How do we look at entrepreneurs and particularly business people as people who are at the forefront of being able to solve for global challenges that exist on an everyday level, but using the innovation and the agility that they have within their businesses? And a lot of times people think, well, business needs to sit outside of solving for challenges. Business needs to sit outside of being part of a creative solution. Business needs to sit outside of being urgent around solving for challenges. But we're saying that business is a force for good. And so how can we inspire imagination and get it ignited in businesses? Well, first of all, it starts with purpose. How do you get a business to actually understand why it exists? The moment a business is able to articulate its purpose, it can start embedding its purpose and then be purposeful in terms of how it goes about solving for challenges. And that suddenly sparks some sort of creative action, and that stimulates the imagination. In terms of what are the attributes that we think about when we're trying to think about how to, inspire imagination in businesses, it's perhaps going back to even our values as the Virgin Group, which are universal, and it's not just us who do this, but for us to articulate them in this way. So it's one saying, how do we make sure that we can spark insatiable curiosity within businesses, within each of us? Because when we start asking questions of why does this happen? What is this thing that's happening? That curiosity starts taking us closer to some conversations and hopefully to some answers. The second thing is, how can we be heartfelt in our service to ourselves, to our businesses, and to our communities? People are our businesses. The communities in which we exist in are our businesses. And of course, our impact that we have on the world and the planet, that's what our business should be doing. And so having heartfelt service is important. Having smart disruption. I think for a long time, we've been talking a lot about disruption for the sake of disruption, but being smart about what is it that we're interrupting, what is it that we're disrupting, and why starts bringing the smartness to it and perhaps gets our imagination going. The fourth is, can we be straight up in terms of what we're doing? We don't need to be complicated. We just need to ask one question, be succinct, get it going, and focus on that one thing and make sure that we see it over the line. And then, of course, can we be delightfully surprising in all that we do in terms of, can we surprise ourselves? Can we surprise our communities? Because that in itself gets our imagination all fired up. And then the last, but very relevant to us, is can you be red hot and relevant? Meaning, can you do something that people actually need, not what you're in love with because of your solution, but what is it that people absolutely need and therefore will be willing to pay for you? And you can grow your business, but at the same time, you're actually affecting change in the world. And so my final point is that when we're talking about how to inspire imagination within businesses growing and established, we need to think about the ecosystems in which these businesses exist, therefore our cities. And so can our cities be places that are inspiring? Can our cities be places that are inspired? And can our cities be places that are relevant so that our entrepreneurs and our ecosystems can actually grow and change business for good?
A whole lot. I couldn't stop to type, and I wish my typing skills were much faster than I do have. But thank you very much for inspiring us to think about business as a force for good of creativity and community, addressing the actual community needs, and then the communities will be willing to pay. And so it's no longer just about profits, right? But also addressing the actual needs the communities have. Okay, thank you very much. Now it's that moment where we take a deep breath and then take a moment of reflection, and then we just share some thoughts. All right, and if someone can spotlight all my panelists back. We have spoken about creativity in business, architecture, community engagement. How are you cultivating your own creativity, and what guidance do you have for others to do this?
Eddie, I want to hear from Olamide first.
Yeah, sorry? We would like to, yes, we are going to hear from Olamide. Thank you very much. We have been talking about this. Now, Olamide, what role does imagination and creativity play in your area of work? What is the role of agencies like yours? How do you inspire alternative thinking in your partners?
Great, thank you. So yes, I think we've heard about private sector, and I guess I'm coming in from maybe the NGO CSO point of view here in terms of imagination and creativity. And so for us at LUDI, Lagos Urban Development Initiative, I see us as in-betweeners. We're the people that create bridges. And we do a lot of advocacy towards government, but the idea is to really bring the voices of those who cannot, who don't have access to government officials, to ministers, to policymakers, and get their voice heard. So I think that's where we come in as a nonprofit organization in Lagos. And we focus on mobility and mobility, sustainable mobility, and public space. And I think in terms of imagination, and creativity, we don't purposefully try to be creative, but I think what happens is when we bring different groups together, the innovation happens, the creativity happens. So for example, we asked some young girls, what's your vision for your community? What do you guys want to see? What do you guys love? And all of them couldn't really put their finger on it. But then we had to really break it down and think about, okay, what do you like about your community? What do you not like about your community? Where are the spaces you enjoy being in? Where are the spaces you don't enjoy being in? And taking all their ideas and now working with like architects, designers, people that work within public space, we put together this into like an artistic vision. And they could then kind of visualize something that's more tangible and they could touch and they could see, rather than thinking about just within their head. And I think that allowed them to kind of really understand that, okay, this is possible. And this, once they kind of see this, they can then edit it, they can change it the way they see it. They can say, no, actually, we want more trees here, or no, we don't want more trees. Actually, we really need a playground. We need a space where we can engage and talk to each other. And so when you start putting all these ideas together, you can then use this as a tool for advocacy. And it's not necessarily about us doing the advocacy, but they also now have the tools to say, hey, this is actually what I want. And I can show you and I can articulate it to their local government official. And I think that's super important for them to also have that power and that kind of language to be able to say that. And I think that's where the creativity comes. You're bringing in, these different groups of people, those who actually will use these spaces, and those who will design these spaces, or those who design these spaces. And so it's about showcasing these designs and being able to advocate and use these tools for advocacy. And then the last thing I want to say is about, because I think another question was asked was, how do you inspire alternative thinking? And I think, I've kind of mentioned that, but I think here the point is, what are the needs of all the different groups? It's really hard to sell something, let's say government official, yes, we want to put this park here, and it's important for the community. But actually, the government official is thinking, how can I increase taxes? How can I, how is this economically viable? So the social is very good, but also we have to think about the economy of the city, right? And so you have to really think, for us, we have to really break this down into what is everybody's needs, and how can we make sure we merge everybody's needs within one proposal or within one development, whether it's hard infrastructure or soft infrastructure. And I think that's also where we try to tinker the thinking. So, okay, fine, you want something that's economically viable, but it can also be sustainable. It can also look at climate resilience. It can also look at all these different aspects that, that will help the community, and not just an economically viable project. So I have some examples, but I'll stop there. And I think we can discuss more in the discussion.
Thank you very much. And so, amplifying the voices of the many, and probably those that are often marginalized or not brought to the table where decisions are made. How do you do that? I get some tips from you. Bring different people together. Create an environment for creativity to emerge and blossom. But hey, remember that different people have different needs, and therefore creativity would emerge when these diverging needs have a common goal. Well, thank you very much, and we would definitely appreciate any tips on how to make this happen. We have heard, we have listened, we've heard that creativity is embedded inside us as Africans, and it should come out. The question is how. I think when will be answered tomorrow, but today we are talking about the creativity. Anyway, going back to you. Now, we've talked about creativity in businesses, in architecture, in community engagement. How are you cultivating your own creativity? Now, this is for all of you to think about. How are you cultivating your own creativity, and what guidance do you have for others to do this? We will first go back to Malika. I can see Malika. Oh, she's there. Okay, yes. Some reflections on this, and we will continue like that. When Malika finishes, and if you have some connection, you can connect on there, or if you have something different, yeah, let's hear from you, Malika.
Thank you, Eddie. What I find beautiful and affirming is listening to each person who has spoken before and hearing the resonances between our different inputs. Whether it's about acknowledging that there is indigenous wealth in our creativity and that it's always been there, and that sometimes it's a case of shifting the focus, which is also why I started with poetry and the notion of looking up, because I think a lot of this is about perspective. It's about lenses with which we understand value and what we recognize as even economic.
I'm very excited about the internship program.
Matapelo, hello. And I think it's that lens, that ability to look in a way, it is about looking inward. And I don't mean necessarily only on a personal level, that affirming the fact that you do actually have inherited cultural and personal creative capacities and resource, and that isn't a separate activity or hobby that you do on the side of your academic work or your work in an industry or for a corporate institution, but that you have this resource that needs to be infused into everything that you do, or that can be, and that it has multiple benefits. When I listened to Rashik also speaking about the idea of investment and ways in which we get different partners to understand the support or the invitation even to artists or creatives to come into program development or strategy. I think if I look back over 25 years, that's probably been one of the biggest challenges, is this limited knowledge of what it is that we can do as creatives. And then also often a kind of habit of new leadership that comes in gung-ho with great enthusiasm, but doesn't look at the fact that they might be reinventing the wheel. In other words, not starting from the premise of asking who has done this before and who's not in this room is a very important conversation. If I want to engage community with my wonderful idea, somebody else also mentioned that, not just going in gung-ho with your great idea, maybe Nwabisa. This is a vital, it's that thing of asking the right questions. Who's not in this room? Who has done this before? Is there a way that we can get everyone, from the administrator to the venue manager, to the finance manager, to the director, to also be in that room with the creative collaborators or partners? Because unless we all get excited about the common vision, unless we have a sense of the generative inspiration that is coming from this input, your understanding of what artists would need or creators would need in order to enable them to make their contribution will be off. And so often there's organizational challenges where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or someone who's handling logistics hasn't had a conversation with someone who's going to be delivering something critical for the artist to do their work. Do you know what I mean? So this integration and conversation, I definitely just want to halala about that.
Who is missing in the room? Who is missing in the room? We need to get the right people in the room. We need to get them together, and then creativity will emerge. Now, in our chat, someone is also asking, when you, especially for Olamide, I think when it comes to you, think about this. When you bring these groups together, do you make use of serious gaming, urban games? I'm curious about the experience with this tool. Okay, now Rashik, while Olamide is thinking about that, we've just heard from Malika also saying that we need the right perspective and lenses for the values that people hold dearly to. Coming back to you and to the question that we had, how does creativity and imagination play a role in your work? Now, this is getting personal. Over to you, Rashid.
Thanks, Eddie. Personally, I think fostering creativity in our lives is difficult to do. We all have various pressures, trying to find the balance between family and work and our egos to perform, and the changing levels of lockdown, especially in the last 2 years. Personally, it's a pause and a space, and in my case, in that of our team, we make time to learn from others by observing what they do. And this is easier, of course, outside of the pandemic restrictions. So if possible, once a week, to spend an hour observing the nature of informal traders, how they're packing up, how they're moving. And it's always very curious to us, this opposition to informality, when what we see in urban spaces is that the more functioning informal traders, the more safety in numbers, safety in people, and you don't need just CCTV cameras and security forces to keep people safe. So just by observing what people do, their movements, their activities, observing the way a bus intersects with a bus station, what doesn't work? What could be smoother? Why are we taking precious time out of people's day by not lighting walking routes sufficiently to and from transports, keeping women and girls in particular and vulnerable groups safe? So I think creativity comes to this a mixture of pausing and observing and taking perhaps part of our ego out of it, and seeing how others are being creative, sometimes because they're forced to be creative, the routes they're taking to keep safe by walking, the decisions they make about how to spend to keep their goods safe while trading. I think we must bring ourselves back to the streets and to spaces. And I think in the work of Alameda, we see lots of that as well. And that's how we do it, by not necessarily that doodling or drawing or performing is bad, but I think by seeing the humanity in others.
Thank you very much, Rashik. An encouragement to pause, observe, and then come up with creative solutions. I wonder, how many directors out there, how many councillors and government leads can make provision for that particular time for people they supervise, for people they lead, to say it's a moment, let's step back, let's observe, let's see if we can come up with possible solutions for the ambitions or for the challenges that we are working towards. Thank you. Now I'm moving over to Tosi. Yes, Tosi. Any practical ways how creativity and imagination actually happens in your area of work?
So I'll give you a very personal example. I have a project I'm doing right now in the northern part of Nigeria for the UN, which is a resettlement town for people who've been displaced by the insurgency Boko Haram. And to answer the question in the short form, and I'll give an explanation, I think it's important to learn from one's network, skills, technologies that have been developed from existing practitioners that are forward-thinking, sustainable, that can be replicated in alternative projects. So I have an architect colleague, Adesho Kumbu, who had developed a system of being able to tyrolean, which is to create an external wall finish without using any paint, using the ground condition with a mix of cement and a bonding agent. And he done this on 2 projects. And it's so amazing where we have this beautiful laterite soil, which is that red soil. I don't know if you guys have it in the southern part, but in West Africa, you've got this beautiful red soil. And to use this as a finishing material, which is very similar to what would have been used as a vernacular. Let's bring back an understanding. Let's also think forward, where we're developing systems of maintenance and sustainability, which don't have the same negative effects that we have with the existing systems of finishing external buildings. And I spoke to him that I've got this project and I've spoken with the community and they've expressed a particular color, which I realize is actually from the vernacular, something of the familiar. And I realized that, I could use this technology that he's developed on this project. And he very graciously shared with me the process of application, which we have used on the project and will be used to complete 350 homes. Now, this is a development that is being done as a resettlement town. There are several resettlement projects being done by the government, by other external agencies. But the point is, this is the first one to use this system. Can you now imagine when so many people have learned this very simple application, how we're going to see this now, percolate and form a new way of actually finishing externals of homes, So this is what I mean by, this is something that has really been hiding in plain sight, using the local materials available, but now being able to take a technology, develop it in a system that is applicable to so many other people, the possibilities really are endless. So it's sharing of knowledge, working within one's network, I think can really help us to get this forward.
sharing of knowledge, working within our network. Now, I hope that our participants take note of that. By the end of Rise Africa 2022, make sure that you have made at least 10 connections. Look, we are 101 people. So if you just get 10% of that and expand your network by 10%, creativity is yet to explode in your own way of life. Well, having heard from that excellent example from Tosin, now we go over to Nabisa. Yes, practically, how is this playing out in your field?
Sure. So I think for us, it's important as we're working with entrepreneurs where we realize it's a very lonely journey and it has many, many challenges, and yet it's an incredibly exciting journey. So how do we then as the Branson Center with the Virgin Way bring in a little bit of fun that then inspires creativity for the entrepreneurs? And so within ourselves as a team, but with every entrepreneur we work with, at some point, quite regularly, we have a conversation that starts off with the question of, wouldn't it be cool if? And being able to ask that question of saying, go back to when we were children and we'd always just sort of lie on our backs and look up into the sky and say, wouldn't it be cool if we could fly? Wouldn't it be cool if I could grow, an extra pair of legs or whatever? And suddenly you go back to the entrepreneurs in terms of saying, wouldn't it be cool if? And inspiring that creativity and saying, for a moment, walk away from the challenges, walk away from the constraints, because somewhere in that moment of answering, wouldn't it be cool if, you're going to find an incredible solution that will actually surprise yourself, challenge you, but at the same time, be the very thing that you've been looking for.
Wow, excellent. Okay, me, I think smiles are just filling me up because of what I'm listening to, because of what I'm hearing. Fire in the belly, as one of my workmates calls it, fire in the belly starter. Wouldn't it be cool if all the participants also shared how they are feeling, how they are inspired, how they imagine creativity playing out in their own sector, in their own area? I think you can hear some greetings from Mike Goose. Wouldn't it be cool if we had lots of goose singing in online workshops? Thank you very much. Now we are moving over to Olamide. Olamide, you also had an earlier on question. If you are using some games, tell us, over to you. But also specifically, how are you in cultivating creativity? I mean, you already highlighted some, but we would like to hear more. Thank you.
Great. I think I'm just going to touch on some things that people have said because I think they speak super loudly to exactly what I'm also thinking. Of course, people have mentioned working with others, the importance of learning from others. That idea of continuous learning is important. And then Rashik also mentioned about ego and being humble. And I think that, you have to understand that you don't know everything and maybe you're not the best at everything, so that you need to learn from others. And I think those are really highlighted or highlight within the work that we do at Ludi. The other thing in terms of practicality, I think what I've tried to imbibe in my own practice is that everyone shares a presentation every month. So one person a month does a presentation to the whole team. And again, something maybe Nwabisi is also trying to, these kind of questions that you raise, but what they have to do is present on something that we don't already know about. So it can't be about urban issues. It's got to be about something else and something creative and something not even new, but something that you've observed. And we've had so many different presentations from, how to use social media to things like, how a particular group of a particular community are farming and how they've been able to raise money for this particular farm that they're doing. So we've had so many different presentations, and it allows us, as Rashik says, to see something that you wouldn't normally just see. You have to sit and observe and learn that thing. So it allows the team to do that within their own space and then teach us as a full team about what they've been seeing or what they've been observing within their own lives. And I think that has really helped us to think outside of the box. and to be able to kind of learn, because as I said, you know, it's really about continuous learning. And then the last thing about the gaming and the tools that I guess we use. So we have used gaming. There's actually a colleague of mine that's just done a card game for collaboration around water projects. And so we do use some sort of gaming, but we try not to use high tech, because most of the people that we talk to a really good wide variety of people, from community leaders to young youth, to government officials. So we try to use quite low tech, but we are doing we're aiming to do soon a public space project with government officials and young people, where we are looking at working with UN Habitat and using Minecraft, which is it's a game, architectural game or building game. So we do try to infuse gaming, because it kind of breaks those boundaries, and it makes it more fun and engaging. And once you start kind of removing those boundaries of, oh, this is a formal event and we must think like this, or we must talk like this, then you start to kind of get the real kind of feelings and the real thinking of why people do certain things, or why people react to certain things, and how they would like to see it and how they would like to see change. So I think the idea of gaming is quite important, and we do try to put that into the work that we do.
Thank you very much, Olamide. So gaming, embrace gaming, embrace gaming. And if you keep it simple, the better. If you want it to embrace the power of technology, you can try it out, as long as it's accessible to the people that you are chatting with or that you are working with. We have come to that moment where we slow down. If we had adequate time, I think this is the time when we would also get another song from Malika to embrace the moment and then connect with all the ideas that we've had from our panelists. Thank you very much. I think it was inspiration for me in particular. As we draw towards the end of today's session, I would like to invite our participants to share a tweet. Imagine if you were to share something that you tweet from this session, what would that be? Now, this is the time where you get close to your keyboard and start typing. If we are to share a tweet about a takeaway from this session, and a takeaway that leads to action, what would you do differently to embrace, to amplify creativity in your own way, in your own work? My West African friends would say work, the East Africans would say work, and the South Africans would also pronounce it differently. That's diversity in the same continent. Yes, back, please type. What can you do to bring more imagination and creativity into everyday work? In a tweet form, what can you do to bring creativity and more imagination in your everyday work? Hashtag what we seek is right at home. Awesome. Thank you very much. What we seek is right at home. All eyes on the screen, all eyes in the chat right now. Never forget that we are created to create. Thank you very much. Yes. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Pause and observe. Cities, walk, talk, connect, and take it back to your office. Thank you. I see Wayne Maluleke. Urban creativity and informality can coexist in an African urban environment. Thank you, David. Trust, we don't want our ideas to be stolen from us anymore. Okay. Yeah, Paul, creation brings us closer to the sacred, to the reason for being. Thank you. Hashtag collaborate to truly innovate. Awesome. Yes, we will keep them coming. Inclusivity, all aspects of community development, include everyone, more so the people power. All right, thank you. Well, keep them coming for inspirational, probably you'll inspire one more soul to be more creative. Well, I would like to hand over to Rashik to tell us a little bit more. What should we expect through Rise Africa? Rashik, over to you as the tweets come through.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for all the inputs in the chat. And again, thanks to the amazing panelists for really making us think and feel differently. I'll take everyone on a very rapid tour of our program for this 2022 Action Festival at Rise Africa. As you all know, that creativity, agency, and urgency are sort of the center points of our discussion, our projects, our actions, and our thinking across the next 3 days. We couldn't decide on one in particular. We realized that there was a need for quick change, but that this change needed to come from people, whether it be leadership or the next movements. And then in all of this, that there's an ethos or value of creativity, not just around arts, design, and culture, but in how everyone is embracing creativity in the way they work and the way that they engage. The festival is hosting 33 sessions with over 135 provocateurs or speakers who are from across Africa and the world. So that's really incredible. You know, just today, you could speak to somebody in Lagos, Nairobi, somebody from Morocco, Johannesburg. So I think really the Rise Africa Action Festival really is a Pan-African event. And in each session, there'll be really different ways to contribute. You can share new ideas. You can showcase what you already are working on. Not everything needs to be a bold new launch of a particular project. And if need be, you can launch your new initiatives. But ultimately, it's bringing people together and seeing if we can find a new way together to amplify your work and to create these cities and spaces we all desire to have. If we focus particularly on creativity, this is the really hard work where, as Eddie mentioned, you've got to keep experimentation alive, and innovation alive, and cultural expression alive, not just in a particular box on a particular day. And if we just look at the kinds of sessions, it's not just creativity in the traditional sense, but we're looking at imagination, you know, innovating with infrastructure. Certain sessions are looking at tech and how civic tech, which is technology for building better relationships between government and people. We'll see later today, we'll hear from 3 different creative voices on affordable housing, on public space design, on electric buses. So really creativity in the broader sense. And I'm particularly looking forward to the session on photography as well, and hearing from other sectors and in how they see the dynamics of cities. If we move on to agency, I think we all realize that without trust, participation and ownership can mean very little. So it's really, really important that we see agency in a broad light. And we see these sessions in this area as being sort of a testing ground for, you know, what are the next climate change action movements? How do you really build these relationships between government and community so that they remain tense but constructive? Are we really including the youth and young professionals in certain areas? And in some sessions, we're looking at how do you create research where local governments and authorities will really use it in their work and to guide their work. And also just keeping a space open for future possibilities, not being restrained by simply projects which are concrete, and building platforms for those creative spaces to think about the future. Of course, all of these sessions are on the 2022 program on the website. So this is really just a summary. And again, coming back to urgency, which is the vital need to see change right now if we are to meet the challenges of climate crisis. I think we heard from Paul earlier, who said we are just 8 years away from the Sustainable Development Goals. So there is a need to act, but we need perhaps a diverse set of new tools from how we invest and which agencies and authorities and entities are investing. Looking at arts and poetry, do we need new forms of cities or city-making processes? And then again, how do we map this urgency? A particular session will be looking at a roadmap for urban heat mitigation, which is a massive challenge in terms of its impact on the loss of biodiversity and the quality of our environment. And so all of these sessions under urgency are not just about restating the facts and not just simply about restating what the challenges are, but about trying out new ways to address this need to act immediately. And so just to conclude, we see Rise Africa 2022's Action Festival really as in that tension point between creativity, agency, and urgency. Some of us find ourselves more in the creative space, some of us find ourselves more in the urgent space, but I think give yourself a chance to really sit between those three and create equitable and sustainable African cities and African futures, whether it be in finance, governance, the arts, or grassroots mobilization. I really like this particular part of the curator statement, and it says that Africa stands at the cusp of a reimagined rather than an altogether new identity. Next to these overwhelming challenges, we must note the possibilities of the present, and in fact, there's the urgency. A young population with new ideas and energy to be unleashed, cityscapes that have yet to be designed and built, and food, fashion, and music cultures worth sharing. We must reimagine our cities and make these imaginings physical now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rashik. I think the participants will be spoiled of choice. A lot to come. Now, Paul is going to share something about our photo competition, and I would like to prepare you also ahead of time that we should take a group picture. Remember those days when we were in person and we had to pause for a picture? Please prepare yourself for a group picture after Paul. Thanks, Paul. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Eddie, and I wish to, again, in the spirit of my full appreciation of everyone who's giving their time and ideas to the festival, appreciate our panelists and the insights they've shared thus far. You may have known, if you are part of our mailing group, that we ran a photo competition around the same theme, creativity, agency, urgency, and asked people to reflect on how these manifest in their cities. And I'm privileged to be able to present the shortlist and the winning photos. Of course, now I'm looking to see which screen I've shared it on, but maybe I'll just share my desktop and go from there. Oh, no, I'm just sharing my emails. 1 second. I've been quipping in online meetings that thank goodness we still fail to mute ourselves. Thank goodness this isn't so intuitive that we don't just become robots super quickly. Okay. Here we go. Can you all see? So we received 117 unique entrants, which is absolutely fabulous. And we shortlisted to 11. There is a session later today which engages a bit more deeply about what we're seeing in the photos. And as Tosi indicated earlier, creating space, creating tangible things that people can touch and engage with, I think is a great way to bring people together. And last year we ran a session around the Hidden Flows photography showcase, which was the same thing. If you take images people from all different sectors can come together and have a conversation around them from different perspectives. So I'd like to share, and I'll try and give space to observe and breathe in and enjoy these. Kinshasa by Night by Herman Kambala. Ashura Night in Morocco. Urban Decay in Lagos. Growing Up to Know My Origin, Africa is a Blessing. Nairobi Urban Rush. A Tale of Two Cities in Abuja. Tranquility versus Concrete Jungle and the Haves and the Have-Nots in Nairobi. Urgence in Kinshasa. Mother Nature in Accra. La créativité par le petit métier pour faire face aux urgences de la ville in Abidjan. I invite you to visit these on the Rise Africa website, where the full stories of each of them are connected to the images. And to join us in the session a bit later, I'll post the registration link in chat to have further conversation about them. But to present our two finalists for the competition, we have The Last Breath by Kevin Ochieng in Nairobi. The Banana Market in Medina in Ghana by Emmanuel Beko. And the entry we chose as winner was The Good Old Days by Ghana Must Go in Accra. We had hoped to have the judges join us to each offer a reflection on the journey and why it was chosen. We have a video recording from Bedru Katumba from Uganda, who worked with us in the Hidden Flows project to reflect on why they arrived at this photo as their choice. So I'll share that now.
And I'm humbled to have been one of the judges of this year's competition. I chose Good Old Times as the winning image because basically it matched the theme or the call of this year's competition, and the picture was taken in such a dignifying way, which is what all Africans are calling for, telling our stories in our best narrative. So, and also being that family is where everything starts from in Africa. So for everything to be, well within society, family has an upper hand, or family has a role to play. So for any change that need to arise, should first be told from the family. And today we see a lot of cities developing or urban centers arising where there is not that cohesiveness, where there is not that family union. And that's why we see so many things are not going right. But I like the way he pulled off the theme of the family and trying to bring it this year's theme, and typically that's why I chose the image, and also the technicalities, the lighting, the framing, and the way the picture was taken really deserved to win. Thank you.
So as mentioned, we'll have a session. I'll throw the link into chat. We invite you to come and experience what engaging around a boundary object means. Thank you very much. Over to Eddie.
Thank you very much, and please embrace the creative you, and let's try to get this group photo, and congratulations, of course, to the all amazing winner. Thank you very much. Now, remember those days? Here, there are several advantages and disadvantages, but I think the advantages, maybe they balance out. Well, I would like to invite all of you who are inspired to switch on your camera and let's take some group photos. The cameraman might be seen or might not be seen. Can I invite Paul to take the screenshots as our prevailing camera person? Okay, I see. Slide one, ready. I hope you see my creative guitar from. Yes. Next.
So do we have everyone on? Smile. I think, what are we saying? Rise Africa. Rise Africa.
Rise Africa. Yes. Nice. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Now we come to the end of this session, but also the beginning of several other sessions. And with the end of this session, I would like to invite our panelists in a word to say, what do you leave with us as your final thought? If you had 30 seconds like the ones that I'm offering you right now, what would you leave with us? Cool.
Eddie, we do have a good 10 minutes if you want to be generous with more than a word.
No.
But your choice.
No, with 3 minutes. If we have 10, okay, let's do 2 minutes and then we wrap it like that. So with 2 minutes, what is your final challenge to us? What would you leave with us as a takeaway? Thank you. Now, this time round, I'm going to start with the one who is inspired to start. Who is it? First one to unmute. 1, 2, 3. Tossing.
Okay. I think I want to leave us with the answers are in our problems. We just need to open our minds to see, to see the solutions that already exist. They've always been with us.
The answers are within us. The answers are within us. Now passing it over to Nwabisa.
I think I'd like to echo Tosi's thought, which is we have everything that we need. We just need to connect the dots and make use of that and leverage that in order to ignite our imaginations.
In order to ignite our imaginations. There is an interesting facilitation technique which we say yes and. It seems you have started us on that. Yes on what Tosi has said, and now, okay, moving over in that direction, but feel free to also maybe yes, and let's keep in that spirit, because I think we are all building this narrative of let's embrace creativity. Olamide, what's your offer to us as takeaways to reflect on? Thank you.
Yeah, mine is just really simple. Collaboration is key. Very simple.
Collaboration is key. And then we move over to Rashik.
Ambition and combined with optimism.
Ambition and combined optimism. Optimism. Then, last but not least, Malika.
So
we are all here. We are all here listening to you, Malika.
I want to offer a simple refrain, and it goes, every story knows its teller, every story has its time, yours and mine has its place and time. I'm going to do again. Every story knows its teller, every story has its time, yours and mine has its place and time. This is a very simple refrain. You can do it in, in any form of expression that you'd like. It can be the nursery school vibe that you do with the younger generation. Every story knows its teller. It can go like that, or it can be the deep contemplation of the fact that each of us are carriers of stories, ancestral wealth in imagination, creativity, resourcefulness, resilience. And we need to, half of storytelling is listening. Half of any conversation is emptying yourself enough to imagine and create space, as I think all the panelists have pointed to, that powerful sacred pause, the vessel through which inspiration can come into when we step just a little to the side about what we think we know and the story that we think we're in charge of or need to control. So that beautiful breathing space is also just to lighten up the feeling of let the story out, let the story go, tell your story, every story matters. And together we have an incredible tapestry that has unfolded even in this one and a bit precious hour. So thank you so much for all your sharings. It was a gift to be here.
Every story has its time, every story has its teller. And
every story knows its teller. It's
every
literally, if you're quiet, you can hear it calling your name. What is that story that you've always wanted to tell, or that wild idea you've wanted to say out loud and thought people would think you're crazy?
Sure.
That's the one we're listening for, that one.
Every story knows its teller.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Malika. Now let's go on and tell the story. Thank you very much. How about for our panelists, I would like to challenge you to offer a huge hug to our participants who have stayed to the end. Yes, please. Yes, get it and send it out. Yes. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for engaging. Thank you very much. And now, let me hand over to Paul to do officially close and tell us what next. Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you, everybody. I have been inspired, as is my expectation when we put together such fine thinkers, doers, enablers in a room, as my colleagues here. So I'll conclude maybe with some logistical points and maybe one inspiration, which I have to find on my phone as I must read it. So logistically, we have we'll close in a few minutes, and there are 15 minutes for a bio break, some water, and we will then broadcast some pre-recorded lunchtime keynote lectures today by some great thinkers. You can find them here and find them on our Instagram as well, which is Future African Cities. It would be really wonderful if you could share reflections on the session using the survey. The link is farther up in the chat. It really does help us think through what value people are getting from these conversations and how they're taking it forward. I want to remind everyone that this is a series. Today we've spoken about creativity. Tomorrow, my colleague Funmi Adeni will lead us on a journey through agency, I think in a very visceral and deep session, which I'm very much looking forward to. And on Wednesday, there will be a session to wrap up on urgency with a colleague, Nyoka Naidu, leading a conversation with Mayor of Lusaka, Nazreen Alamin, and Bayo Akomolafe, who is a thinker, speaker, creative. And I want to close the session by reading what he has as the foreword of his website, which left me very inspired and excited for this week. And I hope I do it justice. And I hope it excites you to join us in the next series. I am quite confident that even as the oceans boil and the hurricanes beat violently against our once safe shores, and the air sweats with the heat of impending doom, and our fists protest the denial of climate justice, that there is a path to take that has nothing to do with victory or defeat, a place we do not yet know the coordinates to, a question we do not yet know how to ask. The point of the departed arrow is not merely to pierce the bull's eye and carry the trophy. The point of the arrow is to sing the wind and remake the world in the brevity of flight. There are things we must do, sayings we must say, thoughts we must think, that look nothing like the images of success that have so thoroughly possessed our visions of justice. May this new decade be remembered as the decade of the strange path, of the third way, of the broken binary, of the transversal disruption, the kairotic moment, the post-human movement for emancipation, the gift of disorientation that opened up new places of power and of slow limbs. May this decade bring more than just solutions, more than just a future. May it bring words we don't know yet and temporalities we have not yet inhabited. May we be slower than speed could articulate and swifter than the pull of the gravity of words can incarcerate. May we be visited so thoroughly and met in wild places so overwhelmingly that we are left undone, ready for composting, ready for the impossible. Welcome to the decade of the fugitive. Thank you everyone for joining us today. See you anon.